Character quests in Genshin serve a few purposes. The most obvious one is to be advertisement for the newest 5-star, getting to know them and hopefully love them enough to toss a few wishes down the gacha well. This is especially important for characters that don't otherwise feature in the main storyline, and therefore wouldn't have as much time to shine. For those that are important to the main story, character quests can be both a way to gain a deeper understanding of the character's personality and a glimpse into the deeper secrets of the world of Teyvat. So it should come as no surprise that the sinner's pupil, fool's master, Skirk, brought with her plenty of intriguing new lore information on top of a deeper look into her own psyche. Hi, I'm on Secret Crush. I've been playing Genshin Impact since just after launch, and streaming it on Twitch for almost as long. I'm trying out a new way of preserving my Genshin experience since I can only keep 100 hours of Twitch stream archives now. And if you've ever played it, you know that's nowhere near enough hours for Genshin. I'll be recapping the whole story of Skirk's quest, and then going over all the new information it brought to see where those pieces fit into the grander scheme of things. If you haven't played the quest yourself and are worried about spoilers, now's the time to save this video for later. If you're all caught up, or spoilers don't bother you, settle in, and let's get to it. We begin at Bubu Pharmacy to see Dr. Baiju. Paimon's worried about Traveler's health since they've been spacing out a lot and seem to be tired all the time, no matter how much they sleep. Baiju does a full examination and declares Traveler is in peak physical condition, but instead of sending them away with a vague, "it's all in your head," he's actually more concerned. Without an observable physical cause, Traveler's symptoms could indicate dark magic or a curse at work, or even a psychological cause like mental fatigue that can't be treated with his medical knowledge. He suggests they stay in his clinic to rest for a few days, and maybe he can learn more to help treat their condition. While they sleep in the clinic, Traveler has a very strange and vivid dream that they think feels unlike a regular dream, but is too chilling to be reality. They find themselves in a thick, dark fog, obscuring their surroundings. Suddenly, a spike appears from nowhere and strikes Traveler in the back, but there's no blood, just a strange light and a feeling as if something was taken from them. When they wake up, the wound still aches so much that they ask Paimon to check their back for a physical wound, but nothing is there. Paimon's a little freaked out, but declares they all just need something yummy to get their minds off that scary dream. So they go to Wanmin Restaurant, but Traveler still feels unsettled and has the feeling of being watched. While they eat and talk, Skirk joins the conversation out of nowhere. She happened to be in the area investigating an abyssal disturbance when she noticed the Traveler's soul is damaged, the wound bearing signs of abyssal corrosion. She sits and orders a drink, giving Traveler time to decide if they'll trust Skirk enough to accept her help. Now, as a reminder, they've only met Skirk once, in the Primordial Sea, where she put the all-devouring narwhal into an abyssal Pokeball before yeeting it and Child into a fissure. They know very little about her, aside from being Child's mentor, and a student of Sertology, the Foul, one of the sinners of Conria. But Traveler eventually decides they need her help after all, and describe what they saw in their dream. Skirk tells them to meet her in the Guili Plains when they're ready, leaving some cash to pay for her drink. When Traveler and Paimon go to settle their bill, Chef Mao thinks they've overpaid, because he can't remember there being an extra person at their table. That's kinda weird. At the Guili Plains, they find a pack of rift hounds scrounging up traces of god remains. Skirk dramatically appears, defeating all the rift hounds with ease, while she talks about how traces of great power will linger, even after the being who wielded it is gone. Paimon sneaks up to check that she's not a ghost after what happened at the restaurant. Oh, that, she says, is just a little trick to make people forget about her, because she has no desire to form any connections to the world. She goes on to explain that something has been stealing sources of great power all over Teyvat, digging up god remains, slaughtering consecrated beasts, and even the stars in the sky aren't safe from their pilfering. Skirk assumes the same culprit is also the one who took part of Traveler's soul. She proposes a trade. We'll help her locate this power-hungry thief, and she'll help recover their soul fragment. They'll spend a few days in the abyssal space Skirk calls home, where time flows differently than outside, and also where Traveler will be safe from further attacks. Since Traveler isn't interested in learning how to use abyssal power for themselves, Skirk will use the next best thing to help try to locate their soul thief: an abyss crystal that allows them to perform dream mirroring while they sleep. While they're awake, Skirk is going to give Traveler some special training, starting with blade work. Blade work training mainly means thinking about all the sword friends we've made along the way and breaking 900 crystal columns. But don't worry, they don't make you, the player, actually break 900 columns yourself. After a good workout, it's time for bed. While they sleep, Traveler finds themselves in a bleak, dark space and wonders if they might be seeing Skirk's inner world, while Skirk is observing their dreams. A small, sealy-like creature silently leads Traveler around, showing them various vignettes with indistinct blob people that seem to be from Skirk's childhood. Baby Skirk's mother scolds her for skipping school, while her father cheerfully encourages her desire to explore outside. They mention a merchant ship from beyond the stars, whose recent arrival has made Baby Skirk even more restless than usual. Baby Skirk daydreams about what's out there in the big, wide universe that she just heard about from the visiting merchants, and can't wait to grow up so she can see it for herself. But when she returns home, her village is on fire, and ominous dark purple blobs are attacking all the villager blobs. The villagers cry out, "What have we done to deserve this?" They welcomed the foreign merchants into their homes and showed them great hospitality. Why are they returning that kindness with violence? The attackers don't answer, and only talk amongst themselves about eradicating the savages. Baby Skirk finds her parents wounded, and they urge her to run far, far away, trust no one, and survive. Her mother's scolding tone is gone. Now she only gently encourages her brave girl to grow up to be a positive light in the world. Her father reminds her that life is a gift. Never let the darkness claim it. She escapes as her father sings their favorite song, and the invaders close in menacingly. Traveler wakes up and can hear Skirk singing that same song softly to herself by the fire. But now that they're awake, music time is over and elemental training time begins. Since Skirk uses abyssal energy, she knows very little about actually using Teyvat's elemental energy. It's derived from the power of the light realm, while abyssal energy is from the void realm, and they are in direct opposition to one another. Traveler points out that Skirk's powers look cryo-like, and that's because Skirk uses a technique she learned in a Conrian ruin called Seven Shifting Serpent to disguise her power, in order to respect local norms. Traveler also mentions their ability to purify abyssal power, which Skirk responds to curiously. Is purification really what's going on there? But it's time to stop yapping and start elemental training. After practicing using all their different elemental abilities, it's time to sleep again. The little creature is back, this time showing us baby Skirk's own training arc with Sertology. Sertology's views on fear being the primary drive to gain power and strength are maybe a bit extreme. He definitely subscribes to a whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger philosophy turned up to 11, along with insisting that pesky things like emotions are for the weak, and cold reason should rule all. Baby Skirk somehow manages to survive and grow under these merciless training methods. Traveler wants to know more, and decides to ask Skirk about it after they finish the special training. This stage of training echoes the glimpses of Sertology's teaching style we just saw, practicing not having emotional reactions during combat situations, because emotions impede reason, and reason is critical for making the most advantageous choices under pressure. Traveler is able to focus on the battle for a while, but eventually their mind wanders, and Skirk calls for a break. Suddenly, all those suppressed emotions come rushing back, and Traveler is once again exhausted. This time in Skirk's inner world, Traveler can't see the little guide creature anywhere, but they've grown familiar enough with the space to find their own way around. They witness scenes from when Skirk has grown older and more experienced. there are some other disciples talking about how impressive she and their master are, a first-person POV training while trying to shut out voices from her past, and a very intriguing scene with our favorite Hexenzirkel witch, Alice. This seems to be after Skirk has arrived in Teyvat, as Alice advises her to come up with a cover story rather than telling people she comes from beyond the stars. She also gives her some personal advice to take time for herself sometimes. Traveler wakes up to the smell of a delicious campfire meal, after which Paimon goes to sleep, leaving Skirk and Traveler to have a private conversation. Skirk offers to let Traveler ask her 3 questions, the chance Traveler had hoped for to learn more about her. So they use their first 2 questions to ask where Skirk is from and what her goal is in Teyvat. Skirk is surprised by that first question, as if she had done a great job of acting like a normal resident of Teyvat up till now. Skirk confirms that yes, she is from a different planet, and Sirtology opened the border between worlds to send her to Teyvat. As for her goal, she needs to become stronger so that she can one day defeat Sirtology in combat, for certain reasons. For some reason, Traveler decides to use their final question to get information for Child, who's been searching for his master ever since she sent him away from training as a kid. Her explanation is that while Traveler was already a seasoned warrior with combat experience to make an ideal foundation for further training, Ajax, as she calls him, was too young to truly master combat training without simply imitating his teacher. She says she will continue to avoid him until he has gained more strength in his own right. Traveler doesn't quite buy this answer, recalling something Skirk said earlier about having no desire to form a connection to the world. But since they've already asked their 3 questions, they won't get any more out of her for now. And anyway, it's time to go get that thief that took part of Traveler's soul. They go to an area on the edge of the chasm, into an abyssal corridor. There they fight through a barrage of monsters and dodge abyssal spikes, just like in training, until they reach the place from Traveler's dream. As they dodge a fresh barrage of abyssal spikes, Skirk notices that the attacks have all been focused on her, as if she was the target all along. One spike manages to pierce her defenses, and her shoulder. As it happens, this spike also had the Traveler's soul fragment embedded in it, so as Skirk removes the spike from her body, she also returns the soul fragment like she promised. She's trying to play it cool about being stabbed, but the spike also stole a chunk of her own power, weakening her and causing her outfit to revert into the form we initially saw back in the Primordial Sea. Skirk surmises that it was because of the Traveler's purification ability, the culprit chose them as bait to lure and ensnare their real target. She also concludes the attacker must know the foul Sirtology, because his attacks mimic the power of the all-devouring narwhal. That name, the Foul, seems to piss off the thief, but that big chunk of Skirk's power he just bit off is proving to be a bit too much to digest at the moment. The group uses this as a chance to escape, since Skirk is in no shape to continue the fight either. They all return to Baiju's clinic to rest. We never actually see Baiju after the beginning, but I wonder what he thought about his patient treating his clinic like an Airbnb and bringing an extra guest along. Skirk's version of resting seems to involve constant sword practice and never sleeping, yet for some reason this is not helping her restore her power quickly enough. 2 days of meditation ought to do the trick, though. While Skirk is in deep meditation, Traveler is surprised by the strange Seelie-like creature popping out of the dream mirroring crystal. It drags them into a place Traveler has never seen before, yet it feels familiar, full of cliffs and waterfalls. The creature speaks and describes the waterfalls as the river of Skirk's inner strength. Strength accumulates over time as the summation of a person's lived experiences, but Skirk's river has been severed over and over with the Sword of Reason, as she tries to distance herself from her past self. This is partly a result of Sirtology's teachings, to crush the self that makes her weak, but also because she carries a guilt that makes her hate her past self. The creature gives more insight into Skirk's background as they make their way to the river's source. Traveler learns that Sirtology promised, or threatened more like, to return at some unknown point in the future when Skirk has made a new life for herself, and utterly destroy it. He calls this a gift of fear. Fear of once again losing everything, just like she did as a child, to motivate her to reach even higher levels of power and defeat him. The creature also explains that her homeworld was destroyed because the invaders learned that even in periods of extreme condition that should not have supported human life, there was always evidence that human life had been there. Due to the people's unique ability to evolve and adapt to any environment or power source, they were seen as a potential threat to be eradicated. If Sirtology hadn't been there, she would have also been swept up in that wave of annihilation. When they reach the source of the river, Skirk is there, waiting for them. The creature asks Traveler to act as a witness to their reconciliation, as Traveler finally connects the dots that this creature is Skirk's emotional self, the parts of her personality she has tried so hard to cut off and hide away. Skirk has a brief debate with the creature, who urges Skirk to see that cutting off her past is preventing her from drawing strength from it. Traveler even chimes in to point out that Skirk's emotional self is the opposite of weak. It broke free from its confines in Skirk's mind basement in order to even have this confrontation. The creature acknowledges that what seemed right at one point in her life, using reason to distance herself from pain in order to make it through the tragedy, isn't going to be right forever. Skirk agrees to carry her emotional self with her until the end, and her river of strength is made whole and stronger than ever before. With her strength restored, it's time to go chase down the power thief once more. The battle mirrors the last one, but this time, Skirk easily dodges the spike attacks and uses them to intentionally juice the attacker with a massive infusion of her power, breaking his abyssal armor's shell to reveal a Conrian noble. He's Skofnungr, and he used to be best pals with Sirtology. As a child, he felt abandoned by everyone around him when he caught an incurable illness, but Sirtology treated him like he still mattered. Sirtology even stole forbidden research to cure Skofnungr's illness. Skofnungr got a taste for the thrill of combat from sparring with Sirtology, but could never catch up to him in strength. Eventually, he was so ashamed of the gap in their skills, he stopped asking to spar, but always longed to match his buddy in a fight. After the Cataclysm and completing his great endeavor, Sirtology grew bored of Teyvat and left to wander the universe. Before he left, he offered to break the curse of immortality for Skofnungr, something a power he recently mastered would allow him to do. Skofnungr declined, thinking immortality might finally give him time to keep training and get strong enough to finally catch up with his buddy. Sirtology's like, okay, cool, if you get bored of that, find my disciple. Neither of them see Sirtology as the teaching type, but apparently, Vedrfolnir predicted he would one day have a disciple so impressive that the stars would bow in her honor. Sirtology also mentions leaving a parting gift in the Primordial Sea for Skofnungr, if he was really serious about getting stronger. That gift was a thoroughly thrashed, all-devouring narwhal, weak enough that Skofnungr could take a chunk of its flesh and attach it to his own heart, setting him down the path of taking power wherever he could find it, with only the curse of immortality keeping it from breaking his body apart. Skirk gives him a mini lecture on how there's no shortcut to true strength, stealing is wrong, and so on. But she also tells him his earlier attacks had no passion, but in this battle she could feel the joy radiating from his blade. Joy at a fight that forced him to use his full strength, realize his full potential, and a defeat without regrets. She thinks that is also the kind of battle Sirtology is hoping for, and the fight Skirk intends to bring to him. And Skofnungr wants to be there to see it. If only he hadn't wrecked his immortal body to the breaking point with all that ill-gotten power. Skirk won't put an end to his suffering through death, despite what Sirtology may have implied. Instead, she can smash his consciousness and all the stolen power into pieces, with the curse of immortality making it so his body and mind gradually return to their starting point. He gratefully accepts, hoping he'll wake in time to witness her fight against her master. With Skofnungr dealt with, all the stolen power has returned to where it belongs, including the Stella Fortuna in the sky. Everyone shares a moment gazing up at the sky, marveling at how beautiful the stars are, even if they are fake. Skirk has some interesting comments about how all bubbles have to burst, and will return to the real universe one day, and also wondering what it will take for kindness to reign supreme in that universe. Skirk pieces out, and Traveler and Paimon decide to camp out under those beautiful, lying stars. Okay, wow! That quest was a lot, and it brought up a lot of interesting new information to go over. Let's start with Miss Skirk herself. Much like the Traveler, she's an alien from another world. The last survivor of a people with a unique ability for evolution and adaptation. Did you notice that tiny little wing fin on her back? It's been there the whole time, apparently. Her home planet showed evidence of human presence throughout its history, even in extreme conditions. Ironically, the people had no idea they even had this ability, and were exceedingly peaceful and naive, welcoming their doom into their homes with open arms. I don't think there's enough evidence to guess who exactly the invaders are, or even why Sertology happened to be around to save Skirk from certain death. And it sure is suspicious that both of them are represented as ominous purple blobs in Skirk's inner world, if you ask me. But what exactly is Skirk and her people? I can't help but think of the Vishops. Something like dragon cousins, Vishops are so good at adapting to changes in their environment that evolution is observable in just a single generation. There's also hints of a long tradition of fantastical tales of Vishops evolving into something indistinguishable from humans, and the experimental records in Enconomia even mention intelligence tests where Vishops quickly became capable of communicating at the level of a human child. Of course, any relation between Skirk's people and Teyvat's Vishops may be an incredibly off-the-wall idea, especially since Vishops belong to the Light Realm. The Void Realm, where abyssal power comes from, is fundamentally opposed to the Light Realm. I'm not sure if extraordinarily adaptable would extend to making incompatible phenomena coexist in a single individual, but the quest does specify her people can adapt to any power source too. And actually, you know who else should be aligned with the Light Realm, and yet was somehow able to become a vessel for abyssal power? The Traveler's sibling. And they even had wings in the opening cutscene. So maybe it's not as impossible as I thought. Maybe everyone is a Vishop person. I'm just kidding. Unless... Moving on. Given Sertology's promised threat to destroy whatever life she builds for herself, I understand why Skirk goes out of her way to avoid forming attachments to the world around her, even going so far as to make anyone she comes in casual contact with forget she was ever there, like at the restaurant. Thematically, this is similar to fellow Ice Queen Citlali, who also wants to avoid the pain of losing friends by simply never having any. One of these days, maybe I'll flesh out my theory that all Cryo characters separate themselves from the world but long for connection to it. I mean, that's kind of the whole theory right there. But it's interesting to look at how each character embodies that concept in their personality, or even their kit in some way. There's that common joke that to get an animo vision, all your friends need to be dead. Cryo characters? I say they have a lot of love to give, but also fear the mortifying ordeal of being known. Anyway, despite her best efforts at living up to Sertology's standards of reason, Skirk is in fact an empathetic and emotionally intelligent person at her core. Despite her excuse about letting Child grow more on his own before they meet up again, I think it's just as much that she can't bring herself to inflict the kind of teaching she endured as a child on someone else. You know how her arms and legs have that trippy, sparkly cosmic pattern on them? That's because she lost her real arms and legs in training, and those aren't stockings or gloves. They're replacements made of abyssal energy. She doesn't care how many hands she fights Child with, but she does care how many he'll have left when she's done. And of course, we've learned that despite coming from outside Teyvat, Skirk does not meet the qualifications to be considered a descender. Sertology had to open the gate to let her through, and she has no interest in influencing the world's fate. Makes you wonder who came up with those qualifications, huh? I don't actually have any guesses who it is. Sorry if you hoped I would. Now, let's take a look at our sinner, Sertology. We learned from Skofnungr that he was born in a prison to criminal parents and grew up on the streets, facing constant criticism. To him, kindness and malice were one and the same. It's no surprise that someone like that would adopt a belief that strength grows from fear and suffering. Having to fight for survival is what made him strong, so why wouldn't that become the foundation of his teaching style? However, it seems like he didn't always regard the weak with contempt. As a child, he went out of his way to help cure Skofnungr's illness, which may suggest he had a sentimental side, at least back then. You could even say his fight-for-your-life attitude is what inspired Skofnungr not to give up on himself when everyone else had, but I don't really want to give him too much credit. Skofnungr refers to Sirtologi's great endeavor, which, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what that is. Since we only just learned the names of all 5 great sinners a year ago, there's still way too many missing details about what exactly each of them did, are doing, or why. Of the 5, we only really know anything about Vedrfolnir, Sirtologi, and Rheindotter, and even that doesn't really form a clear picture of what went down in the last days of Conria. According to Dainsleif, whatever they did either caused or at least failed to stop the destruction of Conria. When they divided the abyssal power the sibling held as a vessel, they all split up to pursue whatever it is they're doing up until now. We know Sirtologi is drifting around the universe, but I assume he has some other kind of goal or project to occupy him until he decides it's time to make good on his threat to Skirk. What I can say for sure is that Sirtologi believed unreservedly that the visionary Vedrfolnir's prophecies were always accurate. So when Vedrfolnir said Sirtologi would one day have a very important disciple, and that he'd send her to Teyvat, Sirtologi wasn't going to argue, even if he didn't see himself as the teaching type. The visionary said so, which I find very curious, because if Sirtologi was aware of this prophecy, and confident in Vedrfolnir's prophetic accuracy, well before he ever took on any disciples, it kinda makes me wonder if Vedrfolnir is so much a prophet accurately scrying the future, or if he's creating the desired outcome by planting suggestions in the minds of others who already see him as a visionary. To that end, it seems that Sirtologi was aware Skirk's people had that unique adaptability, and might have been following the invaders. I've only unlocked a couple of the stories in Skirk's profile, but it says there the people of her planet made contact with the Abyss in ancient times, and traces of that power remained in their descendants. Sirtologi knew the invaders were going to attack, but was surprised when he saw her people's civilization didn't even have any advanced technology or weapons. So it seems like he was actively scouting the universe for disciple candidates. Aside from the prophecy, Sirtologi's other motivation for taking Skirk under his wing is a longing for a proper battle. He's simply too powerful, and bored of facing opponents who just crumble before his incredible might. One can only assume he left Teyvat mainly because he was hoping to find something interesting to fight out there in the universe. The way he's described in this quest, it seems like he's already attained a level of power surpassing the gods. The power to crush everything, change his form at will, and look at an all-devouring star beast as a pet. It seems kinda not great to have a being that powerful wandering aimlessly around the universe, considering the weak with contempt and filled with ennui. Some less important, but still mildly interesting facts we learned from this quest. Skirk's original outfit seen in the Primordial Sea, and after she takes that hit from Skofnungr, is called a star crystal suit. It's basically a backup battery of abyssal energy for her to draw from, since abyssal energy is hard to come by in Teyvat. The Dark Shadow in the Narwhal Weekly boss fight isn't actually Sirtologi, but he used to look like that at one point in time, so that's the shape he takes in any dialogue scenes here. He's also able to use the Abyss as a communication relay to send and receive messages with Skirk, while he's drifting around the universe. Neat! The only other long-distance, possibly cross-dimensional communication method I'm aware of is Alice's Dodocophone. And speaking of Alice, apparently she acts as Teyvat's border guard, something that was previously hinted at by fast food collaboration wind gliders of all things. After the paralogism quest, I wondered what role Alice and the other Hexenzirkel witches are playing in Tevat, and now I'm even more curious. Did someone appoint Alice as Tevat's border guard, or did she just decide to do that herself? Are the witches aligned with the heavenly principles, in opposition to it, or neutral? Collectively, the Hexenzirkel also appear to have levels of power rivaling the gods, and they even have Rhindaughter, another of the sinners of Conria, who merged with the ruler of life, and Nicole, a prophetess and probable former angel, among their ranks. Tell me your secrets, witches. And another interesting little crumb, Conria believed in Stella Fortuna, which is fascinating because the stars and constellations are supposed to be the means the heavenly principles use to control the fate of Tevat. If Conria rejects the rule of Celestia and the Seven, why would they believe in Stella Fortuna and constellations? It could be that the stars being Celestia's puppet strings of fate isn't widely known. Or perhaps over time, as people moved from the other nations into Conria, they brought a handful of their old beliefs with them, until those beliefs were eventually considered cultural practices with no religious connotations. Not to mention, is this the first extremely overt confirmation that Tevat is a bubble, and there's a real universe outside of it? I'm so curious how close we are to finding out exactly why it's being kept separated from that universe. By the end of the quest, I'd almost forgotten that Traveler had been feeling off at the very start, well before any part of their soul got snatched. And I almost thought it was weird that it never came up again, until I realized. Skirk questioned if what Traveler is doing is actually purifying abyssal energy. All the times they've been shown using this ability, especially in Natlan, the abyss energy is flowing into them, like they're some kind of abyssal goo sponge. They don't think it's affecting them, but it seems entirely possible that they've been running around soaking up enough abyss goo that it's starting to mess with them, especially since their elemental abilities are related to the light realm, which, as we already covered, is in opposition to the abyss. That's definitely something I'll be keeping an eye out for in the future. Overall, I loved this quest from start to finish. I didn't have much of an opinion on Skirk herself before, but she's really grown on me. It's also a great fictionalization of inner child work. Skirk lived through 2 traumas as a child, genocide and Sertologi's teaching style. And while I wouldn't say Sertologi was abusive, he was also not a loving, safe person to raise a child either. She adapted as best she could to keep herself safe in that environment, and to keep the approval of the guardian she grew attached to. Master hates the weak, so she has to keep training with broken bones to prove she's not weak. Master says emotions make her weak, so she has to bury her emotions until even she can't feel them. But what kept her safe as a child doesn't work anymore now that she's on her own, and it's time to see that there are other, better paths to strength and survival for her now. Her story also reminds me of another character I love, a naive and innocent child given a flawed view of the world at a formative age, and who later had to learn a very important lesson that trying to erase your past doesn't work. You have to accept every part of yourself and your journey, even the ones you don't like, to grow and change into the person you want to be. My favorite quests are always the ones that strike a balance between revealing all these delicious lore secrets and satisfying emotional arcs for the character. Not to mention, the story's primary message about not letting despair or darkness take your one wild and precious gift of a life. It's nice to have a reminder about that in my fun video game time, especially right now. For, no particular reason. Thanks for watching! I'm very new to this kind of video, and teaching myself editing has been challenging but fun. I'm sure I'll get better and faster at it eventually. If you enjoyed my ramblings, click that subscribe button, and you might also like to follow me on Twitch. I stream at least once a week, and it's usually Genshin, so stop by and say hi. I ended up cutting a few irrelevant segments out of the script, but you might just get to hear me talk about them on stream sometime, if you're lucky. Or you could just ask me about it. I love yapping about Genshin at the slightest provocation. Okay, that's all. See you next time! Bye!